Thank you for joining us here for the WinMagic MagicEndpoint No User Action Authentication webinar.
Gartner has listed passwordless authentication as the highest impact technology in the next year or two, because it helps with companies with two major problems. It reduces data breaches right away and improves user experience. So in this case, we have a user who's going to access Office 365. So he connects in Office 365 in the traditional way, maybe types in his Active Directory password, but we have MFA, so pulls out his phone, maybe a company issued phone, authenticates to the phone, authenticates to the authenticator on the phone, because hopefully we're not using SMS text messages, because that's not very good. Gets a one-time password, usually not quite this simple. It enters the one-time password into the screen and he's authenticated. It's definitely more secure than passwords alone, but it's also phishable. It's almost as phishable as just passwords alone, because if there's somebody in the middle who could capture the password in this exercise, they could have captured the one-time password in the returning token. So, and the user experience involves two devices and going back and forth between the two devices. Now let's take a look at what it would be like with MagicEndpoint. The user wants to connect to, say, Office 365, so they connect and they're authenticated. And then the endpoint itself performs all the remote authentication. To recap the three new ways of thinking, you don't need MFA for remote authentication, and the user is not needed for that remote authentication, and then the endpoint is separate from the remote access. So let's take a look at those distinct benefits that this new way of thinking brings. But where I think the real strength of MagicEndpoint is future-proofing against emerging threats. MagicEndpoint can monitor the user and monitor the user's intent. So they know that user on that device with that TPM was the one that just tried to get that remote service. And there's no guesswork with trying to associate that with some kind of out-of-band authentication.